Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA Sunday Show. I wanted to request you to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. And we are trying to bring to you narratives that you have not heard otherwise on other channels before. So, welcome to the show. And to wanted to mention about this particular topic: mothers against violence and bullying. A few weeks ago, there was a video which went viral about a young Indian boy in school was virtually going through a chokehold. That raised quite a few furor around. Is that that's not okay, and it's indeed not okay that children have to go through violence and bullying in schools. To discuss this matter, I have greatest of privilege of welcoming two people, two mothers from Long Island, New York. One is Indu Jaiswal ji. Welcome to the show, Indu ji. You are
Namaste,
a
namaste,
very
sir.
well-known individual on Long Island. You have been very active in community work. You are an expert and a specialist in nutrition. So, who else to talk about the good health of children than you?
Oh,
And
thank
for
you, thank you,
public
thank you so much.
information, Induji has been one of the pioneer leaders of the Indian community on Long Island. She was the president of India Association of Long Island for 2 terms, and now she runs an Indo-American forum, of which she is the chairperson, along with the founders, several of them here. And today evening, they have a program in Eisenhower Park. So all Long Islanders dress up and go for the show, and I will be there too. So just wanted to say that. And the other is Dr. Pratichi Goenka. She's a pediatrician on Long Island, and she's a great passion for health equity and diversity. And she's very active in Parents Teachers Association. I'm very happy to know that because I was once a very active person in PTA when my son was going to school. She's a mother of two boys, 8 and 10, and I think there is a lot of growing time with the kids to go around. So, and Induji is also a mother of two. So I have great pleasure in mentioning that we have two generations of mothers here. One not so one whose sons have gone into real life after brilliant education and career, and the other one who is stepping into that direction. So who else to talk better about this subject matter than two mothers who are very active in children's lives? So Induji, I wanted to start with you on this. I wanted to also touch upon the elements that define us as who we are. As a, I would phrase this particular thing, what once a senator told me, that we love you Indians as immigrants to the country. You are professionals, you are hardworking, you have family values, you take care of your children, you are not a law and order problem anywhere on the planet Earth, normally speaking. And so that's a point which is very important, that how do we carry through our own value systems to in America, where we are citizens of this country, we participate very actively. So first of all, Induji, please shoot your thoughts on the culture of violence that seems to be plaguing this country almost everywhere, including last night's tragedy in Philadelphia, where the people were indulging in violence and killing indiscriminately. How do you react to that, particularly when our own children have been through this process so very, very well? Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, namaste to everyone, Vibhuti ji and Dr. Pratichi Goenka. Uh, Thank you for inviting us in this panel. Vibhuti ji, this is a very, very serious violence and bullying which we see increasing especially in USA. Every day, when I watch the news, it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting. Why, all of a sudden, I've been here more than 4 decades. I mean, I got married and came here, young bride. I made my life over here. I have two, beautiful twin boys, married with grandchildren, and we never saw. Living in New York, we never heard these kind of news. We used to hear here and there, somebody on the street or having a fight, but not like this. I mean, I was talking to my husband in the morning. even in the hospital, going and shooting at doctors and nurses. We are healthcare workers. I mean, we are there to save lives, and what's going in their mind, we do not know. It's not a good news for our society. And going back to my field as a dietitian, Vibhuti ji, I also sat on the Nassau County Youth Board for more than 20 years. And I was the first one to be appointed as an Indian, a woman or Indian to join the Nassau County Youth Board. Every month I was thinking, after you spoke to me about this topic, youth board, even that time, some members would talk about bullying in schools. And I said to her, I said, what, in Long Island you have bullying in schools? Yeah, Indu, you have no idea what we go through. So I said, but so what you guys are doing? So like a young mother like Pratichi, I'm not going to name the school district. They were doing programs, that the youth board was doing programs. We were trying to help the children. I mean, that was a very, very small scale of news we used to hear. It never became like a big issue, because it was being handled by the mothers, by the teachers, by the schools, and the youth board agency. Wherever we could help, we were there. Before we go further, it is of extreme concern, the violence, and uh, bullying is such a topic where Pratichi can put in. अगर बच्चों को पूछेंगे भी ना, कैन वी स्पीक इन हिंदी लिटिल बिट, अगर बच्चों को पूछेंगे भी तो बच्चे बताएंगे नहीं, because sometimes kids are scared. Okay, and sometimes even adults are scared. Like, I'll tell you a small incident before we go further. Many years ago, I was in a small strip in Long Island, and my son was wearing a leather jacket. That was in those days. There were few kids came, and they tried to, like, poke him, and so either he can give them the jacket or whatever it is. I as a mom took him in the store, and I locked the door. No, no, leave the boys alone. Don't bother with them. Mom, I said, no, no, no. I said, so we called the cops. They handled it. These incidences, I mean, if I wasn't there, my son would have had a fight, and this is what kids do. They incite each other for no reason. For no reason. You are in the safest place in the New York, and it happened in front of me. So that incidents can never go out of my mind, because I experienced it. And I told everybody, I said, look at this, just one boy, these 3 4 boys come in there. And then, of course, we took the right action. We called the cops, and, it was done. I never made a, very big news about it. But what I'm saying is, things happen. And children, if I was not there, my son would have never told me. So my point is, if you experience any kind of a violence at workplace, even workplace, at the bullying at the workplace happens, I think it should be taken seriously. And from what we see what's going on, the result of all this is not a very, very pleasant news. That is my opinion. And we will go further more about it. And I'm going to ask Pratichi ji, Dr. Goenka, a young budding mother in Long Island, and with 2 lovely boys. And she's also in with the PTA. So she can tell you more about her experience. When my kids were growing up, we did not see anything in the schools that time. It was not, bullying was not even a word which we use in our schools. But Pratichi has a different experience now. Okay, Pratichi.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you on this very important topic. Thank you, Vibhuti ji and Indu ji. This is a real privilege to talk on a topic that impacts us as a society, as you've mentioned, but impacts us so personally as women from South Asia, as mothers, and as, I think, civic agents in society today. Right? There's so many ways that we're engaging for change, and it's just wonderful to see and hear about all of the ways that both of you have been contributing to change in the U.S. and in New York. So just very briefly, my work as a pediatrician, I think over the last 15 years as being a pediatrician, and mostly in New York as well as in Philadelphia, I have seen the impact that all of these incidents in school, early childhood, high school development has on the trajectory moving forward for the entire lifetime for these children, right? So much of the tenor of how children feel about themselves, what they can achieve, what their ultimate career plans, goals are, dreams will be, are shaped in those early years. So when we think about bullying in school-age children, we don't necessarily, I think, understand immediately the impact that has on that one child's trajectory for the rest of their life. And so I think that awareness has to be at the forefront of all the work we're doing. The other thing is that bullying is really a microcosm of what's happening in society around us, right? So what's happening in schools, what's happening in preschools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, those are all reflecting of the opportunities, the growth, and the challenges, and some of the evils of what's happening in the world around us. And so to understand that, to combat bullying, which is such a big topic, that one cannot just look in the walls of the school or the walls of the home. We really have to look outward to see what it is that we can do. And as a mom, I think your point, Induji, about these incidents, really, really interesting. I think I have two boys, and after they come home from school every day, 3:00 when I'm home, I sit them down, I give them a snack, and it's my time to say, so how was the day? And for other parents that are listening, usually I'll be lucky if I have more than 2 words. Fine, it was good, good. We played. What did you do? What did you learn? So I've, of course, shifted my questions not to be how was your day, but who did you sit with at lunchtime? Or what did you learn about in science class, to try to get a little bit more information. And the reason I mention this is that kids are processing so many things throughout the day. It's hard for them sometimes to understand specific incidents and to actually even filter that to their consciousness to tell you about them, right? There's often a time and space difference, right? They're in school, they're experiencing in school, they come home, it's a different compartment of their life. And so one thing that I think has really furthered this conversation is the greater visibility of these incidents in the older kids, especially with phones and cameras. So this incident that you talk about I think it was in New Jersey, where the student was in the chokehold. I think most of us Indian parents and many of us have seen this, and it's incredibly enraging to see what had happened to the student, to this child, to the son. And but these incidents have been happening, I think, for a long time. Right now, we have phones, we have social media platforms, we have cameras, and so we're catching them. And one is understanding the incident itself. The second is understanding what the response was, when this incident was described. And so I think there's a lot to unpack. But in terms of my specific vantage point, what I see is we have to think about bullying as something that extends and expands beyond the schools. And how do we, as parents, as mothers, as uncles, aunts, grandparents, how do we engage in that? And how do we start to move society to be more inclusive, so that way everyone's personal stories, experiences are valued, are celebrated, and not seen as potential targets for discrimination or bullying or harassment?
Thank you very much for your opening statement, and I totally agree with that. 2 points came out very clear. You talked about how you ask your children, how was the day? This is very important question, and they would say fine, because there are pressures of school, there is a confidentiality of the environment, that what happened in school remains in school. But as parents, because my son also grew up in the same environment, what I did was engage in conversation with children. And this is something what an American gentleman told me. It was quite remarkable. If you guys, he said to me, if you guys, the first generation Indians and the Indian families, are able to inculcate your values in them, rather than adopting the American cultural values. This is an American telling me, I'm not making it up. He said, our culture in schools are, the children are known to give responses in a couple of words. I don't know. I don't give a damn. I don't care. Who bothers? Right? I'm not using the last word, which would be unparliamentary to use here. But that's what is critical, that for us to engage in conversation with our children, with our value system, because in our society, in our cultural element, what we notice is that we Hindus, and I'm very open about it, we have a family value which is very defined. which is very, very porous, which is very obvious, which is involvement of parents. Mother and father both play a role. In American societies, people talk about that our family values are weakening. How do you see Induji? Because you are also part of the political process very, very closely. You move around with politics. How does the politics of violence and the bullying, the culture of fight, the culture of taking it on, impact our children? How does that clash with our values of peace and love, or the family values where you go respect for parents? Whereas this culture has a different kind of a perception. All moms love their children universally, but there is a particular thing about Indian mothers, Indian parentage, which has its own significant contribution to make to the American family value systems. Where do we go from here, Induji?
Um, Taking on from what your concerns are, as you were talking about bullying and the children, so I remember many many years ago there was a young mother, and she told me, मेरे बेटे को स्कूल में ये लोग बहुत तंग कर रहे थे. मैंने कहा, what did you do about it? She said, मैंने बोला तू भी जाके उसकी पिटाई कर. I said, no. Yeah, this is, I mean, you're like a mother, friends talking. I
Yeah.
said, no. I said, did you tell the teacher? You know, as like you said, new immigrant, they had no idea. They had no idea what they could do. They had no idea what, but the boy did not engage into any violence. But just like mother की thought आती है कि मेरे बेटे को किसी ने तंग किया तो मैं भी तंग करूंगा. We our values don't encourage that. So that case was closed. But it's when we talk to our elected officials, when we go to the school board meetings, this topic is very very frequently spoken. And going back to the statements which we hear from them, uh, Pratichi will agree with me, is children, the atmosphere at home, and what kind of reactions they get, and then also their mental health situation. You know, um, something which you nowadays is becoming more vocal about the color. When I came to this country, let me tell you very frankly, nobody questioned me where I came from. I'm a dietitian by profession. I've been working for more than 40 years in this country. Uh, never did I ever experience that they will not talk to me or they will not accept me because of where I come from. And those days, even, it was not very vocal because we were all here. All immigrants, you said, in this country, we had no problem. We had no problem about, where we came from, our education, getting a house, meeting anybody. Nobody ever even asked me, whether I was from India or anywhere else. I'm here, educated person doing my job. The whole culture has changed now. Pratichi said that. The whole culture of looking at the people, and the more you see in the schools, if you don't have too many children, media also, look at the TV every day. In the morning, evening, we hear the news. The news is getting more and more. I think it should be at the grassroots level when children are growing up. We are all here, we are all American. Last night, my grandson was here and he sang two beautiful songs. He's only going to be 6, and he sang, oh, I know Star Spangled Banner and I know America, America. And I sang with him. I would have actually have next time when he comes, I have to make a tape of it. It was so cute the way he was singing. But this is what they learn. And we are not going to say that no, you can't sing this. This is America. So what I'm saying is, this is the grassroots how children learn. Also, on the going back to the Indian values, yes, in our home, always respect your parents, respect your brother, respect your sisters, always be nice to your uncles and aunts, don't fight with the children, which we do all the time. Or every other household does it too. But when, you never know, sometimes the racial issue comes out in the schools, and maybe that excites some children to try to, pick on people. I do not know. It's a big mental health issue which the schools uh, should be looking into the children, and they all have, Pratichi will know, they have nurses in the schools who are there, to look after. If there's an issue, the child right away goes to the nurse and, talks to them. So the thing is, it's not that it's there, but if you pick on something, if a child or a parent, believe me, we are talking about bullying, not about even the children, but the parents too. If you see any children or any parents doing this kind of an action, I think we should be, as responsible citizens, should be vocal, and we should be able to, discuss with them. Sometimes in a family atmosphere, if you don't feel comfortable talking to your own brother, sometimes the brother might listen to the friend. So take the help of the friend. Listen, I feel something is going on. Talk to him. Vibhuti ji, going back to your statement, open conversation, open mind, talk to people. Talking is very, very important, and I have seen it. If you they say, if you see something, say something. Bullying and what goes in the mental health is, if you see something, like if a child is at home, just withdraws, does nothing, what's wrong with you, something bothering you, talk to them. And I think that open channel of communication, we hear from the elected officials the same thing, Vibhutiji. All the time they are extremely concerned, and they always talk about mental health and about the communication.
Absolutely well said. Mental health and communication. Pratichi ji, you have grown up in this environment, right?
Yes.
You have grown up in this environment. You are more tuned into what
Mhm.
happens in the American classrooms.
Yeah.
There is certain amount of, battle, the fights that will happen. Children growing up, we have been through that process. I have fought in the schools, but the violence part is something which is very important. Bullying as a deliberate process that we pick on what Hinduji was talking about because of somebody's color, somebody where he comes from. Those things are, when they get targeted, that becomes terrible. Now, what is your experience in this regard? And we are all agree on this matter that we need to have more direct communication without fear, and this country encourages communication between us. And I remember seeing in my school, the son's school, that if your parents have a disagreement or a fight, report it to us. I've seen that
Yes.
also on
Yeah.
the glasses of the windows in the school. That if,
Yeah.
and I said, my goodness. So children are supposed to talk to the school. If parents have a tiff in the morning, that can't become an issue. So there are several issues that are very important. How did
Yeah.
you handle that growing up in the
Yeah.
classroom, and as a mother, as you see your children growing up in this
Yeah.
environment? It's very important.
That,
Your thoughts on this?
yeah, great question. And I would say that, it's been such an interesting evolution to be able to experience school in this country now 30 years ago, grade school, elementary school, high school, and then having a glimpse of it through my children's eyes, but really being able to see it even more deeply with my work in the school as part of the PTA leadership. So that's been very interesting. Now, one thing I wanted to go back to with that, what Induji had mentioned, was this idea of experiencing discrimination or experiencing differential treatment. And I'm so happy to hear your experience, that you never had those sorts of experiences, or not consciously experienced that I'm being, questioned where I came from, or questioned why I'm here. But I will say that, growing up in this country, my accent is what it is. I was born in Boston, raised in Florida, then New York. I couldn't count rather, the number of times I've been asked, well, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from? And, I think as I grew up in this country, I remember going back to India every 2, 3 years, spending the whole summer there. And while in India, I can speak my native language I thought very fluently, apparently with a little bit of an accent. And so right away I opened my mouth, and everyone around me would know that she's not from here originally. She's from there. And I was constantly in this flux between being here in this country and being questioned, where are you really from? So thinking, oh, maybe that answer is India because that's what they're seeing me as. And then going to India and then being like, oh, but where are you from? And saying, oh, America. And so, I tell you about that because I think that for children of color, children of South Asian descent, it is sometimes difficult to find your place in this fabric. And that's where we need to really work on that idea of inclusion and saying, wherever you're from, you're here. And we're building the story together. And how do we enhance that dialogue in the school setting? And what I'll say is, there was nothing that I remember. There may have been work, but as a student experiencing it, there was nothing that I remember significantly happening in that regard during that school time. I mean, I was one of probably 3 Indian kids in my school. I can, think of a couple of very painful incidents where I was definitely, harassed because of my background. And I certainly pray that my children and our entire community's children don't experience that, but I know they do. And I know they go through that as well. And so I know that in that time, I didn't know what to call that experience because I was young. I didn't have that maturity. I didn't have the words for it. I don't even remember if I told my parents about it again. And I had very open, constant communication with my parents. We spent a lot of time talking. So, I think that this idea of discrimination or harassment, or what we say microaggressions, right? These small little mosquito bites. And every time someone asked me, where are you really from? It didn't hurt me. I answered the question and I moved on. But when you're asked that question so many times, or now I'm in healthcare as a resident, as a medical student, oh, doctor, we experience these things. I think we're in New York and we're very lucky that we have such a multicultural environment. And I think that we are leaders in pushing these conversations forward, not just locally, but regionally and nationally, which I think why we experience some of the great positives around feeling included in this regard. I mean, Induji, you've been on the Nassau County Board in so many regards for many, many years. That is such a credit to you and a credit to the environment that you've helped to build, right? So I think that's something really important to keep in mind. The second thing that you mentioned that I love, both of you, is this idea of speaking up. And if we're out in the grocery store and, at pickup during school time as parents, if we're in a meeting, if we're at work, if kids are there, how do we encourage each other to speak up? And there's a lot of work around allyship and how we can actually teach our children to be allies for each other. That is not something that you wake up and you know how to do. It's not a skill that you are born with. It's a skill that you have to be taught. If you see something, say something. Well, how? How do I say something? What do I say? I also have to think about my own personal narrative, my own personal experiencing. I may be seeing something that's actually bothering me. And you want me to then act up and say something responsibly. So how do you teach people to navigate that? And when does that education happen? Whose responsibility is it? What's the curriculum around it? Those I think are really important questions to keep in mind as we think about not just school age bullying, but as we move into that realm beyond workplace, personal life, professional lives, etc.
This is truly remarkable because we have one example of Induji saying that nobody asked her where she came from, and you are talking about the next generation where you were always asked to identify yourself. Where are you from? Induji, you have been part of this American process very deeply. You have been in the leadership role with the Indian community. Where does one go from here, considering that this identity crisis is bedeviling this country right now? The political system is somewhere along the line not helping it either. And to tell you the truth, and you are probably aware that I'm contesting for New York State Assembly on Republican ticket. So you have been part of the process. I'm going to be part of the process. Once I win, I won't say when I win, but once I win, with your support and the community support and the people's support, everybody. These are issues because children are the future. All politicians unequivocally and universally always say, whatever we are doing is for our children and your grandchildren. But are we really paying true attention, the attention that is needed by the system and the process? Your experience on that.
Very well said, Vibhuti. First of all, I'm very happy that you're running for the elections, and definitely, it's good to have our own be part of the process, which is the way to go. So, wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
As I'm listening to you and Pratichi, I'll just give you a few insights. When I became when I started meeting the elected officials, I was very vocal for the Indian needs. And, maybe I was always out there, whatever, how God was with me, guiding me through. My first question to one of the officials was, I used to see program at Eisenhower Park, which we are having the program today again, right? I told them, I said, where is India? He looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, I don't see India over here. I said, we need our programs here. And he tapped on my shoulder. Indu, come to my office and we will work on it. So within 2 months, we had a meeting and summer was coming. Mr. Gulada announced on a very big gala program that we'll be starting the Indian American Night. Now, I was so happy. I think our whole community was very happy that we got a spot at Eisenhower Park, which is like a flagship program from the county for different countries. So we had India over there. The reason why I felt very important, because other children, other communities, even if people did not ask me where I came from, and Vibhutiji, the thing is, our first generation, when we came, we were so busy in our work. We were so busy going to work, raising children, buying houses, buying businesses. Pratichi says going back and forth to India every 6 months. Our life was totally at a fast pace where you would not even think that, okay, we have to do something more for our community here. So Indian American Night was started, and where the whole audience was not limited to Indians only, it was all local Americans from different schools. They were inviting all the schools to come and see. And the impact it had was, they saw how we wear a sari, they saw what salwar kameez looks like, they understood what bindi was, they understood what om was, they understood what Indian dances were. And so then I was invited by the police academy to meet the police cadets and grassroots training people, explain to them about Indian culture. If they go and meet somebody, how to speak to elderly women. Sometimes they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to open the door to you, the people are afraid of the police. So we were there explaining to them about the Indian culture. When you go to somebody's house, you take the shoes off, you do namaste. सबको नमस्ते करनी सिखाई हमने कि do the namaste. Indian women don't like to shake hands all the time, they don't like to be hugged all the time. So all these things, we started leading. After that, in the county, we started the South Asian programs, in which we had programs from different countries in one roof, which is during May. May is the Asian Pacific Heritage Month, so we were part of the Asian program, and then India, Korea, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all the South Asian countries, Turkey were participating, and you should have seen the children were exposed to different culture, they were exposed to different arts and artifacts, they were exposed to different music, and they were exposed to different outfits. So why is it necessary? It is necessary because Pratichi was, not that one person, but every second person, maybe I didn't experience it, but people did experience. Look at all the Sikhs, I mean, we had the Gurdwaras, we invited all the people in the Gurdwaras, talk about bullying and discrimination. So they were facing all the time. They were performing at our programs. Why? People have to know what our culture, our tradition is. Then I give credit to the Sikh community. Maybe you remember before COVID, they were doing turban tying program at Times Square. Now, why did they pick Times Square? because that is the epicenter of the world where the people from all over the world come. Pura din they had Indian music, dance, logo ko sikhana ke how we tie the turban, bringing attention to the culture tradition, and of course, so people know that this is our turban, this is sacred, and nobody should be going against it. So, besides all these programs, you see the FIA parade, you see the AI Deepavali, all these programs came into existence as our community was growing bigger. And our elected officials definitely, they always come and say that our South Asian population, Indian population, they are very, and one thing is in us is we are very tolerant. We are very tolerant. And the reason we are doing all this is to create more awareness, open dialogue, and so nobody picks on our color or where we come from.
That's a very good point of trying to spread the virtues and values of our culture, which is very true. Pratichi ji, I wanted to check with you because you have grown up here, you are educated here. Your experience is very different than Induji's experience of continuous identity crisis that is being foisted upon us one way or the other, whether we like it or not. And what was once upon a time the melting pot is today being talked about as a salad bowl. So it is like highlighting the individual differences within the cultural milieu of the whole process. So people have done enormous work in trying to showcase that as humans, as people, we are the same. You are in a profession where you go to a maternity ward and you see all the children born there. They don't have any religious identity, they don't have their own individual identity, they are growing up. Are the cultural values in clash today? What is happening that is causing that particular clash? And how does the homogeneity of human life gets established? Because you see it in the doctor's office. People come with a problem. The problems don't have a religious identity. Why do we identify ourselves under a religious banner all the time, color banner all the time? And when can we establish that oneness of human beings, our universal sufferings, universal pain, universal joys? I think every mother on the planet Earth is very joyous of her children, right? Just as fathers are. How does this particular division come into play? Who does it? Why does it happen? Your
Well, it's
thought.
funny. Something you just said and reminded me of a quote that I recently saw. It's from Jimmy Carter, and it says, "We have become not a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic. Different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, different dreams." And so, we think about growing up, I was taught about the melting pot. And we had stories about it. We did pictures. We had a big soup bowl. We had all the different flags of different countries that our classmates were from, and we put it into a bowl. And I remember like mixing it together. And we talked about this melting pot. And clearly, the rhetoric has changed to say that we're not melting into one homogeneous soup, but in fact we're a mosaic or a salad bowl, or a celebration of each of the individual components that makes up this country. And so I don't know that it's about necessarily moving past that identity, because if you were to ask me, I don't want to move past my culture. I walk the streets, I walk into the hospital, I walk into a PTA meeting, I walk into the grocery store, and I proudly wear the identities of being a mom, of being a doctor, of being an Indian woman, of being an American citizen, of being all these things. And I don't know that I want to necessarily start to think about how do I shed that into a more one human, one, that sort of that's not feasible. I don't think that that's feasible, because we wear all our identities at all times. So I'm hoping that we can, as a society, move to a place where we can wear those identities and we can proudly display those backgrounds, and not have fear of what the outsider looking in is judging or valuing or potentially even acting out based on that. And so I guess, I think teaching, and again, going back to the topic of bullying, is when does that thinking around your own identity, around the identity of people around you, how do we share that socialization with our kids, not just at home, because that we as individual parents have very little control over. I have control over my children and what I teach them, but I definitely don't have, and nor do I want, any significant say on what parents are teaching their children at home. That's an incredibly personal thing that families have the privilege of doing. But we also have to have central areas like schools, like other societal gatherings, like these cultural fairs you're talking about. And how do we start to move this conversation not just into the homes where it absolutely needs to begin and end for so many of our kids, but also into the other areas where they are learning and they are socializing. I know a lot of my socialization happened at home, but a lot of it happened in the school. And so how do we leverage that to really teach what you're saying is universal kindness, right? Universal being just, being fair, being kind and respectful. How do you teach that in addition to math and geometry and social studies and science and botany, etc.?
That's a brilliant point to put together, that we have to maintain our mosaic, as Jimmy Carter said, and the salad bowl, every item added in the salad bowl has a flavor of its own. Not one item has predominance over others. Induji, I will come to you with the second part of the dilemma, is that we are noticing, if that mosaic has to be maintained, if the identity has to be maintained, how do we as Hindus, as Indians, maintain our own mosaic if we are trying to merge on our own? As you said, we are very tolerant, very accepting of other people's values. Are other people also willing to accept our values or not? Because that's what puts conflict in play. My way or highway. And what I'm noticing it is that there is an incessant attack on things Indian, things Hindu. People ridicule our murti pujas. People ridicule our faith because we don't fit into the established pattern of Abrahamic religion. And we ourselves define ourselves as a way of life. Our way of life is something more accepting of universalism, whereas other faiths have their own. So, as we know, we have no problem in anybody being who they are, so long as they don't tell us that you are wrong. This my way, highway attitude is also impacting the conversation and dialogue, and it is aggravating the differences. How does this entire thing merge in this modern environment today, where the individual differences are accentuated, yet we are demanding that we are all the same? How does that play into our political social life? And I'm thank you for saying that it's good to have me. Is that this is my reason? Because I realized during our conversation on swastik battle that we did here, is that there was no voice of ours there. Nobody knows us. We are always on the defensive, apologizing or trying to explain. How do we change that, make that shift?
Very well said, Vibhuti. I'm glad you mentioned the swastika issue. It was very interesting when last year, when this whole bill came through, and all of us, we got on the phone and meetings, and the answer that was given to us was that a lot of people didn't even know the difference.
Right. We were
So
on the Zoom call. Sorry to interrupt here. We were on the Zoom call
yeah, yeah, yeah.
talking to New York
Yeah,
state
they were,
senators and legislators. They said
yeah,
uniformly, oh my
they did.
God, we did not know that this symbol was so important for you guys.
We were on the same Zoom call. So what I'm saying is that sometimes, we never thought this was going to come up, because it's there. Even behind my temple, you see swastika right over there. It is
Right.
part of the temple. So it happened, and I'm glad that we caught it at the very, very early stage, and we voiced our opinion, and we were able to control it. Um, very interestingly, this morning there was a question. My TV is on sometimes in the morning. There was a question asked by one of the young mothers. that my Indian program, my son goes to school, and but how can I make sure that my son maintains the Indian values which parents want? And I'm sure Pratichi faces the question all the time. Answer given to them was going through your temple, through your religious organizations, through your prayers, and how much children participate. So now our community has grown a lot more than when our children were growing up. And I think right now, children have access to a lot more information. They have all the social media, they have the YouTube channel, they have the temples, and they have the mandirs and the gurdwaras where they can go and visit. More children visit the religious programs, the cultural programs, the more awareness. They may not even practice it, but they will remember it, you know, and that's actually is needed. Why it is needed? Because if we don't do that on a routine basis, then eventually children are going to forget about it. Now, when it comes to now you can imagine how much, what a milestone we have achieved with Diwali. I will tell you, I have an account of young girls like a school, and they know I'm from India. But it's I'm a consultant there, so I never spoke about our Indian programs there because schools have special needs and they have their own programs. You won't believe that last year when I was in the school, the principal invited me, and they themselves they bought samosas, they bought diyas, they made Om, they made Diwali, they made everything the whole morning. They were going from room to room to room, and I happened to be there that day and talking about Diwali and talking about the Indian program. I was so impressed. I was so happy with the principal. I said, you really made my day because without even asking me, this is what is needed. It has to come from the local people, like the teacher, the principal thought about it, and all they did was, and I said, where did you guys get the samosas from? They didn't go to Indian store, they went to the American store. So this is how things have changed now. And I was really, and I came and told everybody. I took pictures. I told my husband, can you imagine in the school they were celebrating Diwali? Or normally you take it for granted they should have had an Indian person doing it, but on their own. So my message is that now with the creating the awareness, creating all these programs, whether we do at home or in the park, in the temple, or in the White House, or in the Nassau County, is giving a message. And children knew. Pratichi, you'll be surprised. All these girls knew what Diwali was. They wanted to
I
get the
believe
Diwali. Yeah, they were very happy. So
it.
what I'm saying is, this is how we have to move forward. And this is how our children are going to remember. And I'm sure all those students in my school will remember. And next year again, they will want to eat samosas and they has in their hand. It was so cute. So and then I told them they have a couple of other schools. So next year we'll do a lot more. So it's coming, Vibhuti ji. It's there. People know about it. We just have to give it more positive and more all-inclusive, you know, um, programs.
It's
I'm very
interesting.
happy. Pratiji, I will just mention one word here is that you are absolutely right, Induji. The more interaction happens, more awareness we created. For example, when we came here, 1991, in California school where my son was going to school, we took jalebi, we did created an understanding of who we are, where we are coming from, and our identity. That was very important. Every Indian family must inculcate the sense of identity in their children that we are different because the way we are. And if I do not use the word tolerance anymore. I always say accept and respect
Exactly.
individual differences for each one that is.
Yeah.
That's the way moving forward. So Pratiti, go ahead. You were wanted to
Yeah,
say.
no, two things I think that I wanted to speak about. One was this idea of spirituality. And, I'm always so intrigued in how in our religion, in Hindu religion, how that is expressed so differently from individual to individual, family to family, and region to region. And so I think that that is something that's really interesting. And how do we inculcate, as you said, that spirituality in our children? And not to there's so many benefits to it, but again, bringing it back to what we're talking about today, this idea of bullying, and make, how do we build that resilience in our children? We know that when, bullying, we would love for it to stop. We'd love for any sort of harassment to stop, but this has been going on for generations before, and it will go on generations to come. We're going to try to intervene and try to, minimize, etc. But part of it is also building the tool set for our kids, for us as well. When this happens, how do we cope? How do we move past? How do we move past and actually maybe speak out against? And I've read many things around how how children cope, and spirituality actually comes up not infrequently. And I think of actually, my own school days, and I don't know why this happened, but I remembered driving to medical school. I went to Stony Brook for med school, and I lived with my parents for the last couple of years. I had lived away from home for college and the first couple of years in med school. And then when the rotations time came, we were always in different areas. And so I moved back home with them. And so I think it was like a 13-minute drive from my house to Stony Brook. And it was stressful, right? Going to medical school, doing the rotations. I have so many patients I have to see, and I have to remember all these things. And what's my preceptor going to be like, the attending? I started a practice where every time I went in, and back then we didn't have like, Auto, Android, and Google Play. We had to like put in the CD to like listen to the music. I had a Hanuman Chalisa CD, and I kept it in my car. And every time I drove to school, to medical school for that entire third year, I listened to that. And it was actually like 8.5 minutes. I had 8.5 minutes of that. And I had 5 minutes of like news or music or something else that I would listen to. And that was my commute. And I say this because I think it built my resilience. It centered me. It grounded me. I kind of felt ready to go for the day. So every day now with my kids, when they come down and we have breakfast during the weekdays, that they know Google, okay, Google, play Hanuman Chalisa. And so they start their day with that. And so I think when we think about, again, going back this idea of bullying and what happens in school, bullying is sort of at this apex, harassment, discrimination, but there are so many things that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis that may be upsetting to them. So-and-so didn't play with me. Someone didn't, ask me this. And right, these are all along a continuum of the emotions that kids are experiencing. How do we build that resilience? And I never underestimate the power of our spirituality, our religion, in building that. And I experienced it myself. And I hope that's something I can move along with my, show and sort of teach my children as well. So that's one thought about bringing this idea of spirituality back to the topic, which is how do we, as a society, move against, violence and bullying.
That's a very beautifully inserted the spiritual element of our life, which is critical. And I'm very glad that Google plays Hanuman for your children, Hanuman Chalisa for your children. That's very powerful, because this is how we intercreate communication and engagement. It's very critical. I mean, I'm very proud of you to have said it so openly and so beautifully that Hanuman Chalisa plays a role, and prayer plays a role, spirituality plays a role. But there is one thing which definitely bothers me. You are absolutely right, Pratichi, that bullying will happen in one form or the other. People are talking about gun violence as if people were not killing before guns were invented. Think about it that way. You have stories of inquisitions and jihads and Ashoka war in Kalinga, where people have killed for political power. Violence still goes on. There is something endemic about our way of life, that somewhere along the line we enjoy violence. We have mixed martial arts games proudly played on television. You knock somebody out, and even women are getting into MMA. So the violence is something which is part, but nobody, I think, no, it's the wrong thing. Everybody suffers big time if a violence takes the life of their child. We have a community called Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I'm saying to both of you today that India American Forum evening tonight, please give a new slogan and a new organization, Mothers Against Violence. That's very important, because nobody suffers more than parents, and especially mothers, because you nurse a child for 9 months in your womb. And that is a remarkable link you have with the human beings that are formed and brought to the earth. So that's important. And you must set up an organization, national organizations about mothers against violence. If you can have a mothers against drunk driving, why not mothers against violence? Why don't we start one movement? Because you can't endure the loss of a child in a violent act of a stupid or a criminal. So, as we are coming to the last 5 minutes of this particular program today, I'm very grateful that you guys came up. We had generational conversation here. The spiritual element, Induji, I notice a remarkable surge in attack on Hindus in America. And unfortunate, it's really unfortunate that the most peaceful community in this country or anywhere in the world is subject to a barrage of attacks, which, in my opinion, is absolutely uncalled for. Induji, your thoughts. How do we
Well,
contend
you
with that?
know, like we have said before, any kind of attack on any person, no matter what religion that is totally, totally not acceptable based on what they look like or where they come from. I agree with you, Vibhuti ji. Attacks have become a lot more. And again, in Manhattan, women are being attacked. Asian women are being targeted. So that is something which is very, very serious issue. It has to. It again, I go back to the mental health and the situation, what people are thinking about. Why is this person here? What does she look like? Why is she in the train? I mean, this is not acceptable. So we need to be more, again, mother against violence is necessary. So they have to know that just going and harassing people is not the answer. I'll tell you one quick anecdote before we close. I met a young student about maybe 7 8 years ago. She was in her school. There were students from different countries, basically Asian. So she told me, I have a lot of cousins in my school. So I said, wait a minute, how come you have so many cousins in the school? Oh, I'm from India. I have this one from this country, this one from that country, one from Korea. Do you know that they are all from Asia? I said, yeah. So we are all from Asia. So aren't we cousins? I mean, this is a young girl telling me that we are all cousins because we come from the same continent. So I'm telling you, it is how children look at it. In her mind, we are all the same. In her
Yes.
mind, we are a family and we are cousins. I was literally, taken aback by her statement.
Yeah.
But that's what people have to, be more tolerant, and they have to be more acceptable. And our attacks based on our religion or what we look like or what we do is totally, totally not acceptable at all. Not acceptable.
Yes, it must not be acceptable,
Yeah,
and actually, it has to be deplored. It has
correct.
to be countered. It has to be education. Education element of education has to come in, because as science has proven, uh, as humans, our DNA is the same. So what exactly are we fighting for? And Pratichi, I want you to have your last word on this subject matter. Is that will you support Induji's efforts to establish an organization called Mothers Against Violence? It needs to include all mothers from every community in the entire process, because violence can't be justified the manner in which it's happening. It is a daily story, as if America, in my opinion, America is not looking good in the eyes of my own self. Forget about what the world thinks. It doesn't matter. What I think is important, that we are killing, deaths are happening on the streets for all kinds of stupid reasons. So you, as the next generation of the Indian American community and an American, how do you move forward? Where do we shift the dialogue?
Action, I think. And I think, it's a great question. And just sort of in closing, I've loved hearing the perspectives, and I agree this generational conversation is so rich. It's so meaningful to be able to speak with with both of you and understand the different perspectives. And I think, a short response to your question is, where do we go from here? It's action. I think enough is enough is well beyond. We're well beyond that. I mean, just the events of this past week as a healthcare provider and the just tragic murder of 4 individuals in a health setting where we're going to treat patients. I mean, the trauma of hearing that and knowing that these individuals lost their lives doing their art of healing and caring and curing. And certainly Texas and Buffalo, and I mean, if there's too many places to name, and so I think enough is enough. Is we're beyond that, and it's time for action. And so that's where we need to go. And I think leveraging all the expertise, just even on this call, with journalism, with civic engagement, in healthcare setting, as parents, how do we broaden that scope to include everyone, to have one unified voice that we need to move forward and we need to change. And that is where I think one perspective doesn't allow us to move that conversation forward. It really has to be a collective, as Induji had mentioned earlier, grassroots effort. We see that these movements change. We do see that there has been precedents in this country, in the world, where you have movements starting exactly like we propose to start today, and seeing tangible change. And so I am welcoming that call, and I certainly hope and pray that we can move the conversation forward into stark and swift and immediate action.
Thank you so much. I love the word coming from your mouth when you said action, because I am a believer in Swami Vivekananda's teachings. And he had given a call to all Hindus to arise, awaken, and assert. And to Swami Vivekananda's fourth A, the 3A that he talked about, I added Vibhuti Jha's fourth A, and I said act. Because there is, despite if all the knowledge and wisdom and experience and information, if we don't act, then we are as irrelevant to the situation as it is. I want to thank both of you. Have a great evening today, Induji, and I would look forward to being there. Pratichi, thank you so much for being and giving your perspective to the melting pot and the mosaic and the salad bowl.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Dr. Goenka, for all your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, both of you, and thank you for the audience. As I always say, truth will triumph. What we say in Sanskrit, Satyamev Jayate. With this invocation, I say thank you very much.
Bye.